Thanks for staying with us. In this segment of the show tonight, we try and find out what it is that motivates a terrorist. Why do they do it? Why do people join terrorist groups and participate in these acts of terrorism? Raghavendra Rao took a deeper look at this. Let's watch the story.
Why does an individual become a terrorist? The question, straightforward as it may seem, has no easy answers. The scant research work available on the subject suggests that the paths people take to become a terrorist are often varied and diverse. Mumbai attacker Ajmal Kasab appears to have been motivated by money, by the desire to win respect. His rampage through Mumbai was calculated to instill fear. It must have also given him a sense of power.
You see, Kasab, again, it's a very interesting trajectory. This is a fellow who was basically from, in this particular case, an extremely poor background. Unstable, left his family, tended towards petty crime, violent personality, eventually recruited for money and understood that, well, accepted the idea that he would get great rewards, his family would be taken care of, wanted to do, probably someone who is deeply dissatisfied with the worth of his life, very low self-worth, and feels that he can be engaged in something far bigger than himself, which will bring pride to his parents, bring pride to his family. This is what would be sold to him. And of course, not only pride, but would also take care of his family.
A study titled Psychology of Terrorism, authored by Dr. Randy Borum of the University of South Florida, has analyzed the causes, motivations, and determinants of terrorist behavior. As per the study, there is no set pattern that can explain why an individual decides to become a terrorist. There is no terrorist personality, nor is there any accurate profile, psychologically or otherwise, of the terrorist. So what goes into making a terrorist could be perceived injustice or a need for identity, probably also the need to belong. Dr. Borum's study goes on to add that mental illness is not a critical factor in explaining terrorist behavior and that most terrorists are not psychopaths. Significantly, the study notes that recruitment efforts often appear concentrated in areas where people feel most deprived and dissatisfied.
These are personalities who look or seek everything to be divided into black and white, good and bad. There's no gray area. There is an inability to absorb ambiguity and the uncertainties of life.
Histories of childhood abuse and trauma and themes of perceived injustice and humiliation often are prominent in terrorist biographies, but do not really help to explain terrorism, the study states. Bureau Report, WION.
But there have been many other cases of children who don't come from impoverished backgrounds. They may not have gone through trauma. And certainly, we like to explain how it all unfolds. Joining me for this segment in the show is Shweta Desai. She's a correspondent with DNA newspaper. She worked very closely communicating with a young boy in Syria. He was about 23 years old with one of the Al-Qaeda groupings. He's been there for 3 years now, Shweta, if I'm right. And also continuing with me is psychiatrist Dr. Sunil Mittal, who's going to explain some of this phenomena to us. Shweta, let me start by asking you, what is it that you communicated with him? What was the conversation about on how he decided to take such an extreme route for his life?
So I got in touch with his social media account was called Indian Muhajir, and he had written that he is based in Syria. So that got me really interested in a case of an Indian national who had actually gone to Syria and was participating in this conflict. So I started talking to him on social media to precisely understand the reason that why would an Indian make a journey so far to a distant land to basically...
He was from South India, was he?
Yes, that's what he said. He was not really forthcoming on giving his basic details, but he did confirm he was an Indian national. He was from somewhere, he is from somewhere in South India. He was 23 when he left around 2013. And he made the journey like the rest of the fighters, the so-called foreign fighters that we've seen who've gone to Syria since the conflict in Syria started in 2011. And there are very interesting things actually on the reasons that he gave on why he went and about his background. Just to add on what Dr. Mittal as well as what Tahir and Dr. Gunaratna has been saying, that there is no one type. And I would just like to add on to this, with this particular fighter, Indian Muhajir, he said that he was really good in school. He was really good in academics. He was one of the best sports student. He was even...
How much education did he have?
He had completed his graduation, I believe. And while in his high school, he was judged as the best all-rounder student, including in sports. And he said his life was really good. He came from a middle-class background of Muslim family, who was not really religious in nature, but like just moderate, normal Indian Muslim family. And so that even got me more interested, that how come someone who comes from a very stable, moderate family takes this decision to, go and join a terrorist group. And what the glimpse that I got in his mind through our conversation, which we had for more than 4 to 5 months, we communicated at different timings on various social media platforms, was that this became a very ideological cause for him. The Arab Spring, what happened with the mass protests in Syria, the crackdown by the government, that became a kind of a driver for him to defend the innocent Muslims who were being killed by the government. This was his argument, and that really prompted him. And so I asked him about where did it all begin. And it didn't even begin with the Arab Spring. It began way back in 2009 for him, before Twitter was not even prominent. It was through Facebook pages. He was reading a lot of material on Islamic pages and the idea of Islam as a religion and how it is the best religion. And he was convinced that it is the best religion because he started arguing on Facebook with number of these Hindus or Christians who tried to show him the faults in Islam. And he said to kind of defend his religion, he actually started to study Islam. And he said for almost a month in the period of Ramzan in 2009, when he had no school, he locked himself up, and only thing he did was consume material on the religion.
It's very interesting, and it's very interesting. Let me take a question from, give a question to Mr. Gunaratna. Is ethnicity playing an important role too? What's your take on it, Dr. Gunaratna? I seem to have...
Both ethnicity and religion has played a very important role. For instance, we have seen in Tamil Nadu, the ultra-Tamil nationalists using Tamil nationalism to lobby people into extremism and terrorism. And it even had a spillover effect to Sri Lanka. So we have seen that both ethnic groups and religious groups use ethnicity and religion to mobilize extreme opinion.
Dr. Mittal, just trying to, wrap our head around this. Ethnocentrism, is that part of what you deal as a psychiatrist? If somebody comes with ethnocentrism about their own culture, about who they are as a family or who they are as a grouping, how do you deal with that?
It's a very important aspect of life. All of us have our identity defined not just as an individual, but from our family and the ethnic groups that we come from. Whether it's the idea of a society or idea of a nation, or it's a more universal valued idea. And if there is a religious ideology which says, well, it's not just you, but it's a caliphate, it's widespread. So the nation is not just boundaries. Nation is that whole amount of people. And that's one. The second is, if you look at the ethnic drive, the identity that comes with it, and within that cult, it's an organization. There is an identity, there are positions, there is a hierarchy, there is a responsibility, you get your rewards, and you get some achievements, which you may not get in the otherwise mundane social life.
And there may be sometimes punishments as well.
There will be punishments, and the Savage Acts are not just for the victims of terrorism, but they are also a signal to stop dissents, that you cannot differ.
And I've heard this from many groupings. Some of them are threatened that if they don't go through, then there'd be retribution for their families at times as well.
That's right.
And those have been one of those challenges. So it seems there is nothing like a perfect profile of a terrorist. In our next report, which takes us to Bangladesh in South Asia, you will see how profiles of terrorists have now widened beyond the typical poor and illiterate demographic. What does that say about the psyche of terrorists? WION's Bangladesh Bureau Chief, Saad Hamadi reports.
There is no one pattern that defines the nature of the Dhaka cafe attackers. 3 of the youths were from affluent backgrounds, while 2 others came from relatively less privileged families. One of them is Nibras Islam, regarded as a socialite by his friends and also popular in Dhaka's underground football circuit. After studying 3 trimesters at Dhaka's North-South University, he went to study at the Monash University in Malaysia. Investigators say he was radicalized outside the country. Rohan Imtiaz was the youngest son of a member of the ruling party. He scored A's in all subjects in his ordinary and advanced levels. He was a business undergrad student in his 3rd trimester at another top Bangladeshi private university. Rohan was a fan of English Football League. The youngest of all was 18-year-old Mir Sameh Mubashir, a student at a top English medium school in Dhaka. Mubashir's father claimed he was his son's best friend. The fathers of both Rohan and Mubashir said their sons were introverts, would not hang out too much with friends, but that never explained how or where they became radicalized. So what went wrong?
History of Bangladesh, culture of Bangladesh, it is very rich, and it is very communal harmony is in Bangladesh. Communal harmony also prevails in Bangladesh. But those who are devoid of this culture, devoid of this history, they do not know the history, culture of Bangladesh. That is another cause. It is also a trigger cause of radicalization.
The July attack has made Bangladeshis more wary about the people they mix with. There is suspicion and there are questions asked. There are still many youth from well-to-do families whose whereabouts are not known. There is no clear answer to what drove these young people from such diverse backgrounds to embrace radicalism. Investigators are saying that youths devoid of the culture and history of Bangladesh are more susceptible to radicalization. As a result, although there is no one theory explaining what is motivating the affluent youths to become radicals, clearly the access and exposure of extremist ideologies have become more pervasive. In Dhaka, this is Saad Hamadi for WION.
Shweta, you were talking to him for months. Now, why did he leave India, South India, and go all the way to Syria? What was driving him? Why did he leave, a peaceful existence, a good home?
I think there are 2 very important reasons here. One is, of course, social media has been a kind of a game changer in which people got to know who to connect to and how they could help them reach these places. In terms of Indian Muhajir, he got these details in front of him on social media, accounts on Twitter, on Facebook, where people, you could DM, you could have a direct message with anyone, and you could get information on just reach till Turkey, we'll take care of how we'll get you inside Syria. So one was why he left, because he could. That's one of the answers. Second is, I think reading up on the Islamic State propaganda, or just, on the on the whole of Syria conflict, a lot of these debates came up on, whether you are a true Muslim or no. There was a caliphate established. There is people who are fighting for the rights of innocent Muslims. So these narratives also, I think,
but there are 160 million, 180 million Muslims that live in India. Why would he have to leave India and go to Syria?
Right. For him, one of the reasons what his answers is that, he was living in the land of Kafirs. India is a Hindu majority country. Muslims are minority. And keeping that in line with the propaganda, for him, he was not going to earn anything living here. He would rather, give up his life and his youth fighting for a cause, go to Syria where there is a kind of system established in terms of caliphate, where the Islamic religious laws determine not the democracy or elections, the state of affairs. And that was interesting for him. That was one of the crucial driving factors on why he left and made this journey. But as I said, he left because he got a number of these handlers and contacts which could take him.
So, Mr. Gunaratna, how do you explain the involvement of children in such terrorist acts?
Children got involved in terrorism because of ideology, because they were inoculated against terrorism from a young age. But the ideology of terrorism is very powerful and can have a devastating impact on young minds. And as a result, we have seen very significant youth radicalization.
And how do you contain this kind of terror, Dr. Gunaratna?
Almost all the terrorists have been misled into believing that this is Islam. This is true Islam and they must fight for Islam. So it is so important for mainstream Muslim leaders to stand up and say that the so-called Islamic State is neither Islamic nor a state, and not to support groups such as Al-Qaeda, groups such as the so-called Islamic State.
Dr. Mittal, is there kind of pressure to become instant heroes within their communities, families, to rise to the top right away and not just be ordinary children living a peaceful life?
Surely. Here are young people who have a drive. They're looking for adventure. They're looking for instant results. And they do not probably have connections with the social reality they're living in, whether because of social disadvantage or other reasons. There are other people in their surroundings who talk about a similar ideology. There's a social media which bombards them. Then there are handlers who pick up the vulnerable and, if I can say, brainwash them or sort of change their ideology, make it stronger. And the extreme, the fundamentalist narrative becomes stronger in the mind. So to counter it at the same time, it becomes really important to strengthen the counter narrative of moderate, of the right interpretation, whether it's of Islam or any religion or any political ideology. Young people would be more prone for quicker results and heroism, the glamour, handling a gun, power that's going to come from it. And here are people who actually are doing it. So to dissuade them is going to require counter heroes. People from the same community who have either turned around, who now understand that terrorism is not going to really get them their objective, or actually help young people understand right from beginning that it's not going to really fulfill their dreams and aspirations as they look at it. Along with it, if there is a group of young people which comes from a socially dissatisfied or some politically or otherwise conflict-ridden situation, let's say Kashmir, then it becomes all the more important than those young people be reached out to, that they become a part of the mainstream. That'll be a part of the de-radicalization or prevention of radicalization.
It's a very, very important one.
Engaging them at intellectual,
Absolutely.
emotional, and social levels.
And sometimes when they're locked in that conflict, it's very difficult. I went across to Myanmar with the Chin rebels just a few years ago. And I was with a group of about 30 rebels, the Chin rebels that were fighting the Myanmar government. most of the children there were in the age groupings of 12 to 16, carrying M16s, carrying AK-47s. The heroic, personality that they developed by carrying these guns, they were very proud, and we were constantly scared. I had my son who was as old as them, and I looked at them and I said, this is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy for these children to return back to normalcy, because it's certainly one of the challenges. Now we move on to the last leg of our show. What's the way ahead? Terrorists are trained and brainwashed. But to break that vicious cycle of indoctrination and terror, Fariha Paricha works in the Swat Valley in Pakistan with children. She helps de-radicalize children who've been trained as suicide bombers. WION correspondent Jessica Taneja spoke to Dr. Paricha to understand the challenges.
This is Pakistan's notorious Swat Valley, where Islamist terrorism has wreaked havoc over the years. But an isolated retreat named New Dawn, or Saboon, a new story of hope and resilience, is being scripted. A team of educators, counselors, and medical experts is helping rebuild young lives torn to shreds by radicalism and terror.
Soon after meeting those children, ages 8 to 16, I realized that they were not dangerous in themselves, but they could be made to behave in a very dangerous way. They lacked logical reasoning, critical thinking, what we've been talking about here. And most of them were school dropouts. And after 2 days of profiling, I really thought there should be a separate center for them. They should not be put in jails or detention.
Since 2009, Dr. Paricha and her team have treated more than 200 Pakistani teenagers who were radicalized and thrown into the network of terror groups that rule these parts. A combination of coercion and fear are used with extreme efficacy while indoctrinating these youngsters to turn them into militants.
A hungry child out of school in a village square, roti chahiye jao le lo, under the power of the gun. And then once they decide to agree to go along with the commanders, they are usually abused, and they understand the power then. And then slowly, they're given many times they're given a different identity. They strip away the identity they had.
The proliferation of radicalism through the local madrasas and careful manipulation of the academic curriculum to indoctrinate young minds is one of the biggest challenges in the region.
Educational institutions, that is the worrying sign, and I'm not surprised, because I think the curriculum that is taught in our schools and universities contributes to those to the problem, and it generates a mindset that is based on hatred, and that is based on a narrow interpretation of religion.
This combination of factors is so influential on young minds that very few manage to break free from the vicious cycle of indoctrination and violence.
We have quite a few kids who gave up at the last minute. They were about to blow themselves up, but they lost their nerve, and there was no remote handler, so they survived. You see, suicide bombing to me is an act where in one go you're cannon fodder and that's it. It's not as serious and dangerous and worthy of attention as a militant or an informant or an extortionist, because they are going up the ladder of the pyramid. The suicide bomber remains at the bottom end of the pyramid. So they are dispensable.
As the situation worsens along the borders of Pakistan and Afghanistan, initiatives like these become all the more vital. Jessica Taneja for WION.
I was in the Swat Valley at this de-radicalization center. Slightly after that, I was in Waziristan, where they had this suicide training center for these children. And there were locations where they brought in people who were non-believers. And what they do is they would literally slit their throats in front of these children, so constantly using fear as a mechanism to try and keep these children there for training. Mr. Gunaratna, what is the way out of this? How do we bring back these misguided minds back to the mainstream?
Government must build a partnership with the business community and with community organizations to fight terrorism effectively. the government partnership with community is essential because the community has become the resource base, the resource pool of the terrorists. So it is imperative for community leaders, community elite, schools, religious organizations, all those entities to work very closely with law enforcement and intelligence services to fight the spread of extremism in the communities that we live in.
Shweta, for somebody who's radicalized like the boy you were speaking to in Syria, is de-radicalization even a possibility? You think it's possible?
I do think it's a possibility, yes, because one of the reasons why young minds also make this decision to go and join, terror organizations in far and distant land, which has nothing to do with India per se, is a perceived sense of injustice that comes through, maybe discrimination or just grievances of the minority community here. I think what Dr. Gunaratna said about community building, that has to be strengthened at the ground level, and surely de-radicalization, if done in its spirit and letter, which requires constant engagement, not just talking or counseling once with these people and leaving them off the hook. I think that definitely will make a big difference. And in India, we've actually had two of the fighters who joined ISIS, who were in Syria for 6 months and have returned back.
Sure.
These are, I think, cases of hope. They could be made, in fact, the poster boys of de-radicalization in India, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to be able to understand that you may think you're being discriminated against, but then there is that part of the world where you may be in majority already, and you may still go into being radicalized. So I think that connect is also essential to kind of understand that you may have the impression that you live in a land which isn't as good, but when you actually go out and see what's out there in the world, and you begin coming back and seeing what's at hand with you, that's when you realize where you live. Dr. Mittal, your closing thoughts on if you were to take on somebody who you had to de-radicalize, what is the path you would
Right.
take?
I think I look at it three different prongs to this. One is, of course, handling terrorism. That's a force action. That aside, whether it's military, strong force, but with a caution that the stronger force that you use, the terrorists use it to drum up support to build up more terror. The second bit is de-radicalization. Get the people who are already radicalized back in, and help them to come back and connect to the society, giving them meaning to their life, to their social existence. Engage their families, like was done in Punjab many years back. Their wives, their children, or their parents, giving them jobs, opportunities to earn a living. Use these de-radicalized terrorists to further de-radicalize other terrorists or to prevent radicalization, and engage communities, families, from which are the, like Dr. Gunaratna said, from which are the resource from where terrorists come in, engage them to prevent people moving into terrorist action. So I think it's got to be all three levels.
Absolutely. I think it has to be a concerted effort. Thank you very much for joining us for this discussion, Dr. Mittal. Thank you, Shweta, for joining us for this discussion, and Tahir and Dr. Gunaratne. Decoding the mind of a terrorist is probably as complex as the problem of terrorism itself. There are measures afoot all over the world to bring misguided minds back to the mainstream. The results are encouraging too. On that note, we wrap the special edition of Gravitas. For news and updates from South Asia and the rest of the world, keep watching WION. Good night and good luck.